So you're being recorded, and this session will be posted within the next week or so as a resource for educators on the Project Wild, or the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies YouTube channel under a Project Wild thread. And there are other recordings of Bat Blitz, and it'll be very similar to those. They always tend to be a little bit different. So I'm going to spend the first 10 minutes or so gathering valuable information for me. And my name is Mark Lefebvre, by the way. I'm one of the Project Wild managers. Helping out as the co-host is our Education and Professional Development Director, Elena Takaki. And we're both from the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which is the national office for the Project Wild program. And I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. And I would like to acknowledge that where I'm coming from is traditionally the land of the Tonkawa, the Lipan Apache, and Comanche people. The first piece of information I want to get from you all is how you are today, how you're feeling. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not well at all and 10 being super great, give me a number. So how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? And if you want to add any other notes to your number, anything you feel like you want to share with everyone, or that might be helpful to me as the presenter, that's all helpful too. All right. So I'm happy to see most people above a 5, so I'll give myself an 8. Okay. Next piece of information is a poll. I'm going to launch that now. And this poll is for you to tell me your previous experience with Project Wild. So tell me about yourself. Is the poll appearing now on the screen? Okay. So there's 4 questions. The first one is, what is your prior experience with Project Wild? We'll also ask, how long have you been involved with Project Wild? And what best describes your role as an educator? And what level of students or learners do you teach, or maybe plan to teach? We'll give a minute there. And by the way, if anyone cares to join us by sharing your video, you're certainly welcome to. Feel free to unmute yourself at any time to ask questions. Don't worry about interrupting. And Elena's helping monitor the chat, so that's a good way to ask questions also. We have almost everybody who's finished the poll. I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, share results. So prior experience with Project Wild, it's all over the place there, as it usually is. So we're talking about 12 people who submitted responses. And so about half of you have gone through Project Wild Educator Professional Development or have used Project Wild activities, and some of you have never had any experience. What we're doing today is kind of a new chapter for Project Wild. It's a part of what we're offering online that is free to anybody. If you'd like to get involved in Project Wild professional development training, every state has a Project Wild state coordinator, and you can go online if you search projectwild.org and look for Get Wild. you'll find links to contact your state project wild coordinator. When you take training, then you can access the materials like the Project Wild Guide or the Aquatic Wild Guide, various curriculum guides we have. Okay, next piece of information I need is your experience using Google Apps. And when I say Google Apps, I'm talking about ones we typically use, those of us who use Google Apps. So Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Drive is a big one. Okay, so Google Sheets, those three in particular: Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Drive. So that's 4. In the chat, you have 3 response choices: A, B, or C. If you are a beginner at using Google Apps, type an A. If you consider yourself intermediate using Google Apps, type a B. And if you feel like you are advanced in using Google Apps, type a C. Okay, one of the great things about Google Apps is for educators and students and schools with good internet connections, it's a powerful tool that's accessible, and it offers a lot of well, free ways to do things, and many different kinds of add-ins or third-party connections, third-party apps that can be used in instruction. When using Google Apps, like we'll be doing today, I think it's a good idea, if you can, to be logged in to a Google account. Now, if you're not logged in to a Google account at the moment, don't worry about it. That's fine, but you'll learn how to, for example, copy some of the resources today that you can use in the future. And to do that, you'll need a Google account. And so if you have a Gmail address and you have your Gmail, you're signed into your Gmail, you're signed into Google. You don't have to sign into Gmail to be signed into Google, but that's oftentimes the way how people do that. For many people, their work address is already Googled enabled. So when they're using their work email or their school email, they may be signed in. If you go to Google Chrome, the web browser, you can sign in when you're on Google Chrome. These are all different ways to sign into a Google account. Google accounts are free, so that's another advantage. All right. So today we're going to be doing the online version of Bat Blitz. When the pandemic started, we were looking for ways to reimagine Project Wild activities. Bat Blitz is a relatively new Project Wild activity that was launched with the 4th edition of the Project Wild Terrestrial Guide. And like many Project Wild activities, the simulation involves students moving around in a field. There's changes in populations. They're trying to get what they need to survive. And changes in populations or food supplies can be graphed over subsequent rounds. In this version, of course, we can't gather and move around in a field. So we've designed a different kind of simulation that makes it challenging for you, playing the part of the bat, to acquire food in some cases to survive. And so we'll see some fluctuations in bat populations over the seasons based on your abilities to get the food you need. And we'll be doing that by answering trivia questions about bats and little brown bats in particular. And so when we get to the background information, pay close attention. All right. So I'm going to change the share screen here. And I'm going to the landing page for the Google site known as the Wild Learning Lab. And Elena, can you give me a thumbs up if the new share? Okay. So the Wild Learning Lab, I'm going to back up the screen here. This is a collection of activities that are based on the use of Google Apps and other third-party apps. And so Bat Blitz, one of the activities we have currently as an option here, it will provide instructions. Okay, it'll provide instructions as you see in the blue field that says doing the activity. It will not provide the full activity as printed in the guide, including the more enhanced background information and those instructions for doing the activity in person with students. It will also provide a link to the Google slide presentation. And in a moment, I'm going to show you how to make a copy of that for your own use. You can run it directly from the Wild Learning Lab, but you can't make your own copy if you do. You can't customize it. And then you will also have these links to these different trivia quiz platforms through the app known as Flippity. And when you click on one of these Flippity links, you see the padlocks. Those will pop up into a big screen, and you can click on each of the locks to open up a question. Answering the question successfully allows you to advance to the next question or to score a certain number of points. Okay, so those are our resources for Bat Blitz. Now, anytime you are working in Google Apps and you want to create something or use something that somebody else has created, there's a good chance you're going to want to customize it. And typically people share those apps in a view-only mode. So in this case, Bat Blitz is in that view-only mode. So the settings are anyone that accesses it, they can view it, but you can't edit it. You can, however, make a copy of it, save it in your Google Drive, and then edit it to your heart's content. And so we don't share the original copy in a way that's editable because, well, we need to preserve it, without changes. Any questions thus far about that? Okay. All right. So in the instructions under doing the activity, and I can pop this out and get a closer look, it'll explain some recommendations for Bat Blitz as well as the other activities in the Wild Learning Lab. There's recommendations for using the activities synchronously or asynchronously, using it, for example, as part of professional development training if you're a Project Wild facilitator or trainer, or if you're working with students, and then also suggestions for grade level modifications. We always recommend that you review the activity in the guide and draw from that background information in particular, but it is optional. You can do the Wild Learning Lab activities if you do not have the guide yet, if you have not gone through the professional development training. Under the getting ready, one of the links here, yes.
There is a request to see if you can make the screen bigger.
Okay.
It's hard for some people to see.
Does that help?
Yes, that is, yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay. So under the getting ready, one of the links is this link to the Bat Blitz Google slide presentation. And if I click on it, from there I can open it directly. Now, if you're signed into Google and you want to go ahead and go to the Wild Learning Lab landing page, and if you need to find it, I can put that link in the chat. But you can navigate to this blue document, click on that, and make your copy. All right. Let me pull that up. So this is the link to the Wild Learning Lab. And this is the landing page that we started with. So from there, you would navigate to the Bat Blitz activity and then click on this Google Doc in blue and scroll down to get to the Bat Blitz Google slide presentation. We'll give in a minute. I think it's also helpful for me to repeat these instructions for those who are watching the recording later. Okay. And by the way, while some of you are doing that, I'll take this moment to say too that this presentation of Bat Blitz is part of a larger effort known as Bat Week. And Bat Week is a joint effort from several organizations involved with the conservation of bats. And I'm going to put a link to Bat Week. It's really easy, batweek.org. But you'll find from that link other educational resources about bats. Okay, and while we're finishing up with the time for people to make their own copy of the Bat Blitz Google slide presentation, I'm also going to share this link, and that is Project Wild's own webpage known as Wild About Bats. And you may have registered for this session through that page. All right, and before we log off at the end, you might want to save this chat onto your system so you can access these links later. And to do that, in your chat window, there's 3 little dots. If you click on those, you can save chat. So before I started this session, I saved my own copy of Bat Blitz to use today. And I did that for a couple of reasons, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But before I do, let me go back. I'm going to close out this window. Okay, so now I'm back at the Bat Blitz activity. And as I said earlier, if I click on the slide presentation here without accessing it through the link in this doing the activity document, it gets me a nice version that I can use, but I can't edit it. Or if I can, I haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so I hit escape and it takes me back. Right, so what I did is I saved it into my Google Drive to make a customized one just for today. And I'm going to share that now in just a moment. Okay, now you should be looking at Mark's October 27th, 21 copy of Bat Blitz. So here's a tip. Anytime you're saving a Google app to use for teaching and you think you're going to be using it more than once, I would recommend putting the date into the title of the copy. All right, and I typically like to present in this view, if you all can see it, where you can actually see all the slides on the left, because oftentimes with Google Slides, when you collaborate, it's helpful to see both the main screen and the tile of slides, the slide deck on the left. So one thing that's different about this version, my October 27th version of Bat Blitz compared to the other one, is I've customized it a bit with some slides. I thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice, instead of just talking about where brown bats live, where their range is, to put up a range map? And wouldn't it be good to drop in some photos of their food preferences? I mentioned them in the background, but for many learners, if they can see them, they'll remember it much more readily. And so really, I wanted to show you an example of customizing your slides. The other reason I saved this version is so, as I said before, the original version would not get altered by myself or by any of you. And the third reason is because I want to be able to share this version with you so you can edit it, so you can add content into it later. And that comes with the responsibility of not accidentally deleting all my slides if you do open it, or sabotaging it. And so this is a consideration if you're working with younger learners, you know, middle school students. If you under share settings, if you share it specifically to individual email addresses, then it's not anonymous. You can see who's contributing and who's editing. And so you can resolve some of those challenges. In this case, I'm just going to give you the link and I won't know who's commenting. It'll come up as, you know, anonymous gazelle, for example. Elena, on the shared screen, can you see the share settings open up? Okay. And so I know for many of you who are advanced with Google Apps, this is old information, but for those of you who aren't, and the people up here from the Kansas Conservation and Education, Environmental Education Association, I hope I got that name right, Casey, they're some of the folks that helped design this originally, the original design team for Blitz. All right, that's why they get special recognition here. So at the bottom, we have get link. Anyone on the internet with this link can edit. So I made this setting when I made my own copy. So now I can copy the link and I can paste it into the chat and you can access this directly from your system. So I'm going to do that now. And now you have the link to this presentation. You can open it up. You don't have to, but you can open it up in, I recommend Google Chrome if you have it. You can open it up in any browser. Okay, and so again, for those of you who are fairly new to using Google Apps, you can see at the top of the screen, there's at least 3 people who have already joined and who now can change the screen here, can edit it as we speak. They can, for example, enter data onto some of the slides. And also you can see that they're anonymous because I did not share it to their emails specifically. I just gave a link that anybody can join from. Okay. All right. So let's get started with the simulation. We're going to share some things we know about bats. And to do so, I'd like you to either unmute yourself or type in the chat. What do you think bats eat? So I'm going to ask questions and you start typing as I ask them. Okay, fruit, bugs, insects, moths. Right. What do you think some students might come up with for what? Blood. Yes, a very few number of bat species out of the thousands of bat species do feed on blood. And those species live in Mexico, Central America, and I think the northern part of South America. All right. What bats do you think live near us? So let me ask that another way. What bats do you think live near your location? In Austin, Texas, the Mexican free-tailed bat is one of our claims to fame. Okay, the little brown bat. And Julie asked the question, there's only like 3 vampire species, aren't there? Yes, I think that's accurate, that there are 3 species of bats that feed on blood out of 3,000, it may be 4,300 species altogether. Okay. The pallid bat, 17 species in North Carolina. Okay, the big brown bat, 15 species in Central Oregon. Where do you think bats sleep? Trees under tree bark, lava tubes. Interesting. I didn't know that. Makes sense. Caves, rocks, bat boxes, bridges. How do you think bats find their food? echolocation, sight. Okay. Why should we care about bats? Okay, so we're building we're starting to build that background knowledge as well as check our learners' level of knowledge and possibly correct any misconceptions. Okay, they eat mosquitoes. That's always a big one. Seed dispersal, predators of nocturnal insects, controlling insects, saving us money for pesticide use, their role in the food chain. Good. So here on this very text-heavy slide, there's a lot of good background information, not nearly as much of the rich background information in the original activity that's published in the Project Wild Guide, but most of what you would need to do this activity. And in fact, this background information is so important for your success as a bat surviving that I'm going to read it. Little brown bats are very common in the northern United States and Canada, but are scarce in the southern United States and absent in the southern Great Plains. Little brown bats can also be found in high elevation forests in Mexico. They prefer to eat midges, mosquitoes, gnats, beetles, crane flies, moths, and mayflies. During the day, little brown bats typically roost in attics and human-made bat houses. In winter, little brown bats hibernate in caves and mines. In North America, hibernating bat populations have declined significantly in recent years due to a disease known as white nose syndrome, which was first observed in New York in 2006. That is, it was first observed in the United States or in North America in New York in 2006. The major cause for death for bats with white nose syndrome is starvation. They're not able to get enough food to meet the high energy requirement they take when they come out of their hibernating state. Some researchers have recorded 90 to 100% mortality of bats, mostly little brown bats, at winter roosts, which are known as hibernacula, in the northeastern United States. So white nose syndrome hits bat colonies severely. And so here's a range map for the little brown bat, okay, through much of North America and into the higher elevations in central Mexico. And here's some of the foods that little brown bats eat. Midges, mosquitoes, and I'm going from left to right, gnats, beetles, crane flies, moths, and mayflies. And by the way, these images, they all have a Creative Commons license, and they can be used for various purposes under various circumstances. And they're Creative Commons licenses, which I've included in the next to the identity of the people who originally posted these photos. I've included that information there for the purpose of this activity, which is a free experience for anyone who can join us. We meet the criteria for using these images. And if you ever pull photos from Wikimedia, as many of these are pulled, those typically will have, well, I've always seen that they have the Creative Commons license are always identified there. And so I mentioned that because, we want to honor people's property and copyrights. I know that's a big concern for Project Wild material, as part of our role is protecting the Project Wild copyright. But there are many images out there that you can use, but it's good to check the permissions. Flickr.com is also a great source. And if you set your settings in your Google image search or your Flickr search for Creative Commons photos and read what specifically that Creative Commons license allows you to do, it's a good practice when you're assembling slides for your learners. Okay, moving on. So now for the little brown bat survival simulation instructions. Now, I'm going to describe how you can do this activity once you've practiced it, but we might not get to that portion today. We're going to do it as one big group. If time allows, and if you want to try breaking up into small groups in breakout rooms, we can. That would mean that we need at least one person in each breakout room to be running this Google slide presentation known as Mark's October 27th, 21 copy of Bat Blitz, this very one in each of those rooms. You'd have to have it open on your system, right? So we'll see if we get there, but first I'm going to demonstrate it and we're going to practice it together. So we're going to have a set of questions that represent, and I'm on the second bullet here. We're going to have a set of questions that represents a year of survival for us, for our population of little brown bats. And each year, the health of our bat population will decline as white nose syndrome becomes more prevalent. This will be represented by the questions getting increasingly more difficult. Each question that our group answers correctly represents a little brown bat that survived that year. And each question that we answer incorrectly represents a little brown bat that did not survive the year. We will have 30 seconds to answer each question. Please do not search for the answers on the internet during those 30 seconds. And when our group have completed the 3 sets of questions, then, well, if there's more than one group, then we compare notes and we share our answers. Okay, so we're going to be group 1, and it's just the next slide here. So I'll be that one person from group 1 to share my screen, and I will be clicking the locks. I'll be reading the question to you and recording the answers. And so I'll work the controls. Elena, would you be interested in being the timekeeper? So there's a way to do it with the, as you'll see, built into the slide. And if you happen to have the slide deck open, you can use that timer, or you can just, you know, look at a different timer too and just say time's up. All right. Some questions will have a hint, so we can click on a icon to see the hint. There's a little light bulb icon, you know, that we can click on if we need the hint. And then we will record how many little brown bats survived at the end of each of the 3 years. So on to year 1. Okay, so to answer these questions, you can type the answers in the chat, or you can turn off your microphone and blurt it out. Okay, so here we go. I think I need to, oh, there we go. Okay, so on the third bullet here, click on the little brown bat survival simulation year 1. And I'm going to open up this flippity just from that link. And I'm going to click on the first padlock for the first question. So Elena, get ready. Here we go. What are the only mammals capable of true flight? Bats. All right, it unlocks. So on to the next question. True or false? Bats specialize in eating insects, fruit, fish, small animals, nectar, pollen, and blood. Okay, someone said true. And yes, we have an unlocked padlock now. That means we got it correct. We can move on to the next question. Number 3. Oh, and Elena, each time we start a new question, it's a new round of 30 seconds. Most bats are considered crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk. Bats are also active during nighttime. What is being active at nighttime called? Nocturnal. And it does require that I spell it correctly to get the answer correct. Question 4, fill in the blank. The bat mammalian order Chiroptera means blank wing and alludes to the unique thin membrane of skin between a bat's elongated hand bones. Hand, yes. Next question, number 5. True or false, bats are found worldwide except for the Arctic, Antarctica, and a few ocean islands. Someone said true? Correct. Number 6, yes or no, bats are important pollinators. All right. Number 7, what is one insect that is a major food source for bats? Moths, let's try moths. Okay, so this is tricky because yes, bats do eat moths. What's one that's gets a lot of attention from a lot of people? Mosquitoes, let's try that one. All right. Bats find shelter in a variety of human-made places, such as attic spaces, barns, abandoned mines, cracks of bridges. They also find shelter in natural places like trees. What is another example of a place in nature where bats find shelter? A cave, let's try that. Hey, that worked. All right, so we finished the first year. We got all the questions correct. I'm going to push the escape key here. No, that didn't work. So I'm going to just use my tabs at the top of the screen, or I can close this one out. So I'm back. I think you have the shared view of our Google slide presentation. Okay, so year 1, we started with 14, and we had number of bats that did not survive 0. Okay. All right. On to year 2. So the questions are going to get harder. And you can see at the top of the slide, it looks almost identical from our last slide, but now it says year 2 up there, right? Okay, so here we go. Instructions are all the same. I'm going to now click on this link, Little Brown Bat Survival Simulation Year 2, and it's going to open up that flippity. Now, I don't need to download that flippity and make my own customized version of it. I can just use this flippity, but you can. You can make your own customized version, and there's instructions provided on the Wild Learning Lab page with Bat Blitz on how to do that. And you'll end up taking the Google sheet that's provided and entering in new data to customize your flippity quiz. Okay, but we're just going to use the default quiz, and I can click it directly from this Google slide presentation. Here we go. Okay, first question for round or year 2, fill in the blank. Some bat species, especially those that feed on insects, rely on blank to locate their food. Echolocation, echolocation, echolocation. Yes. Next question. Over 40 bat species are found in the United States and Canada, and the majority of these species eat what? Choose one and enter it as your answer. Fruit, small animals, nectar, pollen, blood, insects, or fish. Okay, so the most popular answer for sure, judging from the chat, is insects. And that was correct. 3, true or false, of the approximately, I said earlier, 4,000 species, it's 5,090 species. I'm sorry, no, I'm getting it all mixed up. Let me start over. Of the approximately 5,090 species of mammals found worldwide, over 1,300 of them, 1,300 of them are bats. Okay, so that's over 20% of all mammal species, and second only to rodents. Is that true or false? Okay. Okay, so previously I think I said there were 4,000 some species of bats, but no, I was mistaken. 1,300, and 3 of them are bats that can feed on blood. Question 4, fill in the blank. Some bat species can eat over 1,000 insects in an hour, the equivalent of eating half their body weight in insects each night. Relatively speaking, an adult human would have to eat blank large pizzas a night to eat the same amount. So this helps if you've read the Project Wild activity background section out of the Project Wild guide. Okay. So we see there was 50 large pizzas. Let's try that. Nope, that didn't do it. We may have to move on. And I do have my my cheat sheet with all the answers so I can help students along with clues. But what I'm going to do is skip this one and see if we have time to come back for it. Number 5, fill in the blank. Little brown bats. Oh, you know what? Someone did volunteer another answer. Let's try 100. Nope. Okay, really moving on this time. Question 5, little brown bats usually catch insects in their blank. Move the insect to their tail membrane and then grab it with their teeth. What do you think? How do little brown bats usually catch their insects in their what? Claw? Nope, that wasn't it. Wing? That worked. Number 6, fill in the blank. Over blank plant species worldwide are pollinated by bats, enabling the plant to reproduce. Nope, wasn't 300.
And that's time, Mark.
Okay. We got it. We got the 500 worked on that one. 7, in North America, hibernating bat populations have declined significantly in recent years due to a disease called what? This disease was first observed in New York in 2006. Okay, let's try WNS. That didn't do it. White nose syndrome. Sure enough. Question 8, little brown bats can fly at speeds of up to how many miles per hour? $30? Nope, that's not it. 100? That's not it either. 25 is getting closer. 35 is getting further away. 20 is very close. Or do we still have time left? 18, close, but maybe a little too slow. 15.
That's time.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure it's 19, but okay. And how would you know that unless you read the Project Wild activity or unless your instructor had you read that section or covered it with you previously? You wouldn't, probably. Okay, so we, out of the 8 questions, we missed 2. That means of our 14 bats, 2 did not survive. Okay, so for year 2, we started with 14, number of bats that did not survive, 2. On to year 3. Here we go. Question 1, fill in the blank. Complete at least one of the 2-word blanks, inserting a space between the 2 words to answer correctly. White nose syndrome causes multiple issues for bats who contract the disease. Physical damage to wings, blank and blank, or I should say blank and blank, dehydration and more. So what are those 2 sets of blanks? That's a hard one, isn't it? Okay, we can come back to that one. Fungus on nose, let's try it. I say starvation.
That's time, Mark.
Okay. Number 2, true or false? Little brown bats are very common in the northern United States and Canada, but are scarce in the southern United States and absent in the southern Great Plains. They can also be found in high elevation forest in Mexico. So is that statement true or false? Okay, someone said false. That wasn't it. Okay. Question 3, the smallest bat species, Kitty's hognose bat, has a wingspan of 6 inches and weighs less than what? The largest bat species, flying fox, has a wingspan of 6 feet and weighs over 3 pounds. So Kitty's hognose bat, a small 6-inch bat, 6-inch wingspan, weighs less than what? A penny. That's it. Question 4. It is estimated that bats save the US agriculture industry over how many $billion each year by eating insects that would otherwise destroy crops? What do you think? 23 billion? That was it. All right, good job, Randy. Question 5, the major cause of death for bats with white nose syndrome is starvation. Bats infected with white nose syndrome awaken more frequently during what? This causes them to use their precious fat reserves. The scarcity of insects in wintertime prevents the bats from replenishing their energy. Okay, hibernation. Great. Question 6. Some researchers have recorded blank to blank % mortality of bats, mostly little brown bats, at winter roosts, hibernacula, in the northeastern United States. What 2 percentages there? Okay, we have from Nicole 90 to 100. So I'm going to type 90 space 100. That was it. Question 7, how high off the ground do little brown bats forage when they emerge at late dusk? Usually foraging low over water, among trees, around lawns, and in other open areas. What do you think? How far off the ground do they forage when they emerge at dusk? 6 feet, 3 to 10 feet? So 10 feet. Nope. Any other guesses before we move on? It's a little higher, not too much. Let's try 15. Okay. Do we have any time left?
Nope, all done.
Number 8. At this time, some bat species affected by white nose syndrome, such as blank bats, are showing a modest population rebound, and much research is focused on finding a way to save local bat species. What is the name of the bats that are showing a modest population rebound? Okay, I see Big Brown in the chat. Sure enough. All right, so we had 2 bats not survive. For year 3, we started off with 12. And we're down to, how many did I say did not survive? Was it 3? Okay, so 9 bats. All right. And here we can record that data from those previous 3 slides and compare it. Since we have a little bit of time, I'll go ahead and do that. We have 14 and 0. And 2. So the question now comes up, do we want to try breakout rooms in the last 10 minutes? So tell me in the chat if we have most people, if they want to try it, we can, or if you want to just stay together as a group, we can do that too. If you
There is a question in the chat, Mark.
go
Why
ahead.
not start with 8, which is the number of questions each time?
Okay. Is the question, why not start with 8 bats?
Yeah.
Okay, and that is the default. If you start this game without changing the default. And so it is arbitrary. In this case, we picked a number based on how many people in our group. Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
No, but we do have a couple of votes to go into small groups.
Okay, we wouldn't have much time. So if we could try 2 groups, and I need 2 volunteers that have the app, that have this downloaded so they could try it out. So Nancy for group 1, and do I have another one for group 2 who will share their screen and run this slide presentation from their screen? And if you are volunteering, you can type in the chat or you can unmute yourself.
And
okay, Nancy says no, that you've just been following. I misunderstood. All right. So that's to go into groups with the very short time we have. It would take 2 people that are ready to run it, and that's a jump. If anyone wants to practice in the last few minutes we have, we can do that as a group too, and I can allow you to share your screen, so you can let me know that as well too. I recommend that if you do want to try this with groups of people online, that you team up with 2 or 3 or 4 co-hosts, co-facilitators, and you practice it ahead of time. Okay.
well, so Mark, with 7 minutes left, how much time would they have in the groups?
Well, for one thing, I think we're deciding we're going to stay together. But
Okay.
yeah, with 7 minutes left, you'd only have a couple of minutes, and the learning curve would be too much. You can see, though, that when you do go into groups, that the slides are identical for each group, except for the background color of the slide. And this allows each group to quickly find their set of slides within the larger deck, and then to record their data. And you can see these timers are built in. So on the shared screen, on my screen, I'm now in year 3 for group 3. If I click on that timer, I can do that when I first click on the question, and so I might have to have my screen split to have this visible. That's another way to do it. And I believe after 30 seconds, it'll play a tone if I've shared my audio settings correctly. Okay, and there were some questions that we got wrong, and we should take the last few minutes to look at those. There it is. There's the sound. Did you hear it? Okay. So I'm going to go through these first. I'm going to start with the number 3. How might the simulation be different or similar to how populations survive in nature? Let me ask it another way. In nature, populations are in flux. Little brown bat populations go up and down. They're impacted by white nose syndrome. In this simulation, that also happened. But how is it different? And don't overthink it. Think of some of the obvious ways that what we're doing today is different than what happens in nature. So feel free to type responses in the chat or unmute yourself. Anytime you do a simulation or you're working with models, it's good to compare and contrast your model to reality. How does our model compare and contrast to reality. Okay, so for one thing, we're not actually flying around, right? We are at computers, stationary, and we're not bats, right? As I said, folks, don't overthink it. Start with the obvious. We're people. We're not really hunting insects. Okay, so weather, we don't account for weather in our model. Good, right? You can imagine there's a lot of ways that our model is very different than reality. The question came up, why do we start with 8? You know, it's really, well, because we picked a number. You know, but we picked a number that we thought would work well for a group online. But is that how it works in nature? No. Okay, disease will be different. Okay, we're not actually ill with white nose syndrome. Food availability, we're making some big guesses about what food is available. Okay, so availability of shelter. So what happens in nature is sometimes hard to model. And so this is a general sense of that allows us to consider those things that bats need to survive and some of their limits for getting those things, some of those limiting factors like disease. All right, so let's look at some of the questions that we had trouble with earlier. One of the questions was, white nose syndrome causes multiple issues for bats who contract the disease, such as physical damage to wings, muscle tissue, and blood vessels. Okay. How many feet off the ground do bats forage? It's 10 to 20 feet. All right. So it's good to go back and figure out what you missed, right? All right. Well, that about does it. And I'll be here for a few more minutes if anyone wants to chat. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you are able to use Bat Blitz or other Wild Learning Lab activities. If you have any comments, please send them my way. I'm going to type my email in the chat. And I'm going to stop recording.